Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at the big ideas for part 1 of section 1.3. So let's start off by looking at the measures of center. When you're asked to describe a distribution, you should be thinking SOX, which is shape, center, spread, outliers, and unusual features. Now I know SOX doesn't, the order of that is different than the way I just said it. So you could say shape, outliers, and unusual features, center, and spread. But let's start with center. When you describe the center of a distribution, there's two different ways that you should describe it. One way is to describe it with the mean. So right here we've got the mean. And we know that the mean is the average of the distribution. The other way that we can describe a distribution is with the median. So right there we see median. Now, one of the things that is important to remember is when should we use the mean and when should we use the median? Well, the mean is best used when the distribution is symmetric. So if we have a distribution whose shape is symmetric, we should be using the mean to describe its center. If the distribution is skewed, then the best statistic to use to describe its center is the median. All right, let's take a look at measures of spread. Now, it's important to note that spread is the same as variation. So whenever you see the word variation or variance or variability, that means spread. So when should we, or what are the measures of spread? Well, let's take a look. We've got two right now. We actually will use a third one, but let's take a look at two. The first one is range, and we know that range is equal to the maximum minus the minimum. So that should be an equal sign right there, not a dash, but the range is equal to the maximum minus the minimum. Now, you really should only use the range to describe the spread or variation if you can't find standard deviation or the interquartile range. So I said a second ago that there was going to be a third one that we were going to look at, and that's interquartile range. But we won't get to that until part 2 of this lesson. So if you cannot find the standard deviation or you cannot find the interquartile range, then it's okay to use the range. But it's probably the measure of spread that will be used the least. So the second measure of spread or variation that we want to use is standard deviation. So here's the formula for standard deviation. For this particular lesson that we did, we actually found the standard deviation by hand, and then we also found standard deviation using our calculator. So just know that you rarely will be asked to find standard deviation by hand, but there's the formula right there. Now, how do we describe standard deviation? What's the definition and how do we describe it if we were asked to say, what does this standard deviation mean? Well, it means this little phrase that I'm about to reveal here. This is the way that we can describe standard deviation. And it would be like this. The context usually varies by the standard deviation from the mean of whatever X bar is. X bar is the symbol for sample mean. So we may say something like this. Let me see if I can give an example. The height of a student usually varies by 5 inches from the mean of 57 inches. Okay, so that just gives you a little bit of an idea. What does the standard deviation mean? Well, the height of a student usually varies by 5 inches from the mean of 57 inches. Now, I was just making those numbers up, but it gives you an idea of how you could describe the standard deviation. All right, now what about the mean versus the median? Now, I talked about this a little bit before, but I want to emphasize it again right now. Because mean and standard deviation are greatly affected by outliers or extreme values. In other words, they are not resistant. The mean and the standard deviation, they get pulled and they change when we have outliers or values that are on the extreme end. Because of that, it's best to use the median and the interquartile range to describe the center and spread when the distribution is skewed. and only use the mean and the standard deviation when the distribution is symmetric. Now, I know that kind of repeats what we said up here, but at the same time, it gives you an idea of why, okay? If we had, I could draw a picture here real quick, and this will be the last thing that we do. If I have a distribution that is skewed like this, skewed right, then the mean is going to get pulled towards that tail, okay? The mean is going to be closer to the tail than the median will be. The median will be closer to the center of the distribution. In fact, it will be the center of the distribution. But the mean gets pulled towards that tail. And because of that, when our distribution is skewed, it's better to describe a distribution with the median. So hopefully this helps, and hopefully you have a great day.